Marcus Johnson had spent his entire life working the soil of his family's land. His grandfather, a freedman who came to own property after emancipation, had fought tooth and nail to secure the 1,500 acres that now stretched like a green ocean outside Marcus's farmhouse. That land wasn't just property, was legacy, history, and proof that his family had endured centuries of struggle and still risen to own something powerful. But one morning, Marcus received a letter that left him stunned. A homeowners association from a newly built development on the edge of his land claimed that his property had been sold in a community auction. His stomach tightened. He knew immediately something wasn't right because he had never signed a deed transfer, never met with their board, never given up so much as a blade of grass. When Marcus drove down to the HOA's office, he found smug smiles waiting for him. The board president, a man in a neatly pressed suit, told him that the land had been legally acquired due to unpaid fees. Marcus's heart nearly stopped. How could he owe fees to a homeowners association he had never joined? He demanded paperwork, but all they produced were photocopies of forged signatures and documents riddled with errors. Still, the local officials, many of whom were connected to the HOA's leadership, sided against him. "It's done," they told him. "You need to vacate." Marcus didn't budge. He knew the truth, and he knew the land was his. But within weeks, construction equipment rolled in. Developers marked out plots, tearing down century-old trees that Marcus's grandfather had planted. They built fences across fields where his cattle once grazed. Marcus stood at the property line, fists clenched, watching strangers hammer signs into the earth that bore his family's name. Neighbors shook their heads in disbelief. Some told Marcus to just move on and let it go. But Marcus couldn't. He remembered walking those fields barefoot as a child. Remembered his father teaching him how to work the plow. Remembered his grandmother's prayers, whispered over every harvest. To give it up would mean erasing their sacrifices. Determined to fight back, Marcus hired an attorney. They filed motions, gathered evidence, and brought forth the original deeds signed in his grandfather's name. But every time the case went before a judge, it was dismissed on technicalities. It was as if the system had already decided Marcus didn't stand a chance. The developers grew bolder. They began advertising luxury homes on prime southern land, boasting of the scenic views and rich soil. Every advertisement Marcus saw felt like a knife twisting deeper into his chest. He wanted to scream that this was stolen ground, that every brick laid was another insult to his family's history. At night, Marcus walked the boundary lines with a lantern, whispering promises to his ancestors that he wouldn't give up. His neighbors saw him pacing and thought he had lost his mind, but Marcus was sharpening his resolve. If the law was going to fail him, then he would need to find another way. One day, while researching property rights at the county records office, Marcus stumbled across something shocking, buried in old statutes and overlooked clauses. He discovered loopholes that most developers and homeowners had never bothered to read. The very HOA that had stolen his land was itself riddled with legal vulnerabilities. The discovery sparked an idea so bold it almost scared him. If they could twist the law against him, what was stopping him from using the law against them? He began collecting records, attending HOA meetings quietly, and studying the financial filings of the board. What he found was a tangled web of negligence, unpaid taxes, and unfiled permits. Marcus started quietly buying up small shares of interest connected to the HOA. Some came from residents who didn't understand what they were selling. Others came from lien auctions that no one else attended. Piece by piece, Marcus was assembling the very power structure that had once tried to destroy him. Weeks turned into months, and Marcus played the long game. While the board members laughed behind closed doors about the man they thought they had defeated, Marcus was patiently gathering the tools he needed for a counterstrike. He spoke little, worked quietly, and let his enemies remain blind to his plans. Then came the day when Marcus filed a motion that flipped the entire situation upside down. Standing in court with stacks of meticulously prepared documents, he revealed that through neglected filings and silent acquisitions, he now controlled the legal authority over the HOA itself. The same group that claimed to own his land was now, by law, under his thumb. The room fell silent as the judge confirmed the filings. The board members turned pale. Marcus, the man they had dismissed and humiliated, had outplayed them at their own game. It wasn't anger in his eyes. Now was cold, precise justice. Armed with control, Marcus made his next move. He announced that the land transfers had been illegal and reversed them in the record books. But he didn't stop there. He revealed years of mismanagement by the HOA, and the residents soon discovered that their homes were no longer secured under the fraudulent leadership they once trusted. Shock rippled through the community. Families who had built million-dollar homes realized that their titles were compromised. Some begged Marcus for mercy. Others cursed his name. But Marcus kept his focus sharp. This was never about revenge. It was about justice. News outlets caught wind of the story, and soon Marcus was being interviewed on television. He told the world how the system had allowed an HOA to steal from him, and how he had used the law to turn the tables. Viewers across the country watched as this black man, calm and articulate, explained that land meant more than property, meant dignity, and dignity could not be sold. For the first time in months, Marcus stood tall on the steps of the courthouse, holding the deeds to his land in his hands once more. But his fight was far from over. Because now, with the HOA legally under his control, he faced the question that would define his legacy. What would he do with the homes of the very people who had stolen from him? The community braced itself for his decision. Some whispered that Marcus would bulldoze their houses to the ground. Others believed he would sell them off and take his wealth elsewhere. But Marcus had something far more deliberate in mind. A plan that would leave the HOA and its residents stunned in ways they never saw coming. Marcus returned to his land with the weight of a decision pressing on his shoulders. The fields seemed to breathe again as he walked through them, the soil soft beneath his boots. But behind him, on the horizon, stood the rows of homes built by people who had benefited from the theft. They looked beautiful, but to Marcus, every brick was a reminder of betrayal. He didn't rush. Instead, he called a meeting with the residents of the community. They gathered in the HOA's clubhouse, the very building where board members once mocked him. Now he stood at the front, calm, collected, holding the official documents that proved he was in charge. Some people glared at him with folded arms. Others leaned forward nervously. Marcus began by telling them the story of his grandfather and how the land came into their family's possession. He told them how much had been sacrificed to keep it. The room grew quiet as he spoke, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, realizing for the first time that they were living on stolen ground. When he finished, Marcus laid out the truth. The transfers were illegal. The HOA had broken the law. And because he now held the legal authority, he had every right to take back what belonged to Jim, including the very homes they lived in. Gasps spread through the room and whispers of panic followed. The next weeks were filled with tension. Lawyers flooded the county offices, residents protested outside Marcus's farmhouse, and local news cameras camped on the roads leading into the community. Some people called Marcus a hero. Others painted him as a villain. But Marcus knew the law was on his side this time, and he refused to waver. In court, he presented the evidence of the fraudulent land sale once again, this time with the added proof of his newly acquired authority. The judge ruled in his favor, declaring the HOA dissolved and granting Marcus full legal control over the properties in question. It was official. The man they had wronged now owned the homes they thought were untouchable. One by one, letters were delivered to the residents. Marcus gave them a choice: either purchase the land beneath their homes at fair market value or vacate the property. For those who could not pay, eviction notices soon followed. The uproar was immediate. Families who had laughed at Marcus months before were now packing boxes and begging for extensions. But Marcus wasn't without compassion. He created a fund for elderly residents and struggling families, allowing them to stay under new agreements. Yet for the board members who had orchestrated the fraud, there was no mercy. Their homes were seized first, sold off to cover debts they had ignored for years. As moving trucks lined the streets, the once proud community began to unravel. For sale signs popped up everywhere, and developers who had once circled like vultures now stayed far away, wary of the man who had turned the law into a weapon against corruption. Marcus didn't boast. He didn't gloat. He simply walked his land again, watching as the houses emptied, the roads quieted, and the fences that had once boxed him out were torn down. He had proven his point. His family's land could not be stolen, not without consequence. The media framed it as one of the most extraordinary reversals of power in modern property law. Interviews and documentaries painted Marcus as a symbol of resilience. Some called him ruthless. Others called him brilliant. Marcus didn't care about the titles. They didn't matter to him. What mattered was that justice had been served. Late at night, Marcus would sit on his porch with a glass of sweet tea, staring out at the fields stretching beyond the houses. He knew some people hated him now, but he also knew his grandfather would be proud. For the first time in decades, Marcus felt at peace with the land. Soon, the land surrounding his farmhouse began to heal. Grass grew back where heavy machines had scarred the soil. Birds returned to the trees, and slowly, the silence of the fields was restored. Marcus often said it felt like his ancestors were whispering to him again, reminding him why he had fought so hard. Not every home was torn down. Some remained, but only under Marcus's terms. Their owners paid him fairly, acknowledging his right to the land. It was not about revenge, it was about respect. Those who respected him stayed. Those who mocked him were gone. The town would never forget what happened, for years to come. People spoke of Marcus Johnson as the man who lost everything and then gained it all back through intelligence and patience. His story spread far beyond the county, inspiring others who had been wronged by powerful organizations. Marcus eventually turned portions of the reclaimed land into a community farm, hiring young people from the town and teaching them how to work the soil, just as his father once taught him. It was his way of giving back, of showing that the land wasn't just his, was alive, and it could provide for many. But he also kept large sections private, untouched, just as his grandfather had left them. He wanted a part of the land to remain sacred, a reminder that not everything needed to be developed or sold. Some things, he believed, were meant to remain free. Years later, Marcus stood at the highest hill on his land, looking down at the patchwork of fields, woods, and scattered homes that remained. The battle had taken so much out of him, but it had given him something greater in return: clarity. He knew now that strength didn't always come from force. Sometimes it came from patience, knowledge, and the unshakable will to protect what mattered most. The HOA had thought they could erase Marcus's legacy with forged papers and crooked deals. But instead, their greed had become the very tool that destroyed them. Marcus Johnson had not only defended his family's land, he had written his family's name into history with ink that no one could wash away. And as the sun set over the 1,500 acres, Marcus smiled, knowing that the land was his again. Not just by law, but by justice, by blood, and by the unbreakable bond of family that no homeowners association could ever truly take away.